another NixOS video entitled Conditionalizing Simple Values in Configuration. What a fetching title. I today had a moment where I wanted to change some machine configuration in something that I'm using for these ThinkPads. And they're all pretty similar, but one thing they share is, as I've mentioned before, is this miserable Optimus Prime mode, where you can either use the NVIDIA GPU entirely or use the Intel thing and then optionally use the NVIDIA thing. It's terrible, and it requires some hacks, particularly when you are in quote unquote sync mode, which is the NVIDIA mode, for it to behave reasonably when it's using the NVIDIA drivers. In the past, what I would do in order to unscrew one of the things, which is that when the system is in sync mode, when you sleep the computer and resume, sometimes the video RAM is messed up and you see these artifacts on the screen. That can be solved by setting this one value called in hardware NVIDIA power management enable equals true. And that's, for whatever that does, who knows, whatever. It just does something to stop that. And so what I would do is here, if I was in sync mode, I'd set hardware NVIDIA prime sync enable equal true. And then I would set hardware NVIDIA power management enable equal true. And then when I wanted to switch it over to offload mode, which sometimes I do, I would go here and I would comment out both of these lines, something like that. But since they are completely dependent on it, the value of power management, in my case anyway, I want to be dependent on the value of sync here. It was, just kind of clunky to do that. So what I did instead was I came up with a way to conditionalize the value of the power management. And I used lib.mkIf to do that. And that is a Nix thing. It is a function that's called with a Boolean value. And I think it's meant to return, I'm not even sure what you'd call it. I think it's meant to return a set, I suppose. We'll take a look at that in a second. But in any case, in my mind, in my imagination anyway, and this is from observed behavior, I did not find the implementation of makeif. This is just from observed behavior. I think this is a two-pass thing. So in my last video, I talked a little bit about how Nix will deconflict conflicting values by priority before. So I think probably was 3 passes, something like that. So the first pass is to go through and load all the the modules. Second pass is to deconflict the values so that you have one set of non-conflicting values. And the third pass is something like resolving these conditionals based on the values that have been deconflicted. So that is just my imagination. That's the observed behavior. Might not be anything like that in implementation, but that's how I'm thinking of it, and it's close enough, I think, as a mental model to describe what it does. What I can do instead of changing those values, independently from one another, but completely in sync with each other, I can use this makeif statement to automate the switching of the power management thing when I set the sync. So I can go into my projects, NixOS hardware, Lenovo ThinkPad P51, and I can do something like this. I can say power management, if config hardware NVIDIA prime sync is enabled, then enable power management. That's what this line, that's what the stanza says. Here's another one here for screen tearing, which is almost identical. It just sets this mode setting thing. So if sync is enabled, turn on the mode setting and power management thing in hardware NVIDIA, and it works fine. If I rebuild in sync mode, it sets power management and mode setting to true. If I rebuild in offload mode, it sets it to whatever the default is, which I think for both is false. So it works fine. The spelling of this is a little. At first, I tried something like this. I tried hardware NVIDIA power management enable equals, then makeif, pass it the Boolean, set the value, something like that. But that doesn't work at all. It attempt to call something which is not a function but a set. I'm just reporting from the field here. This was my first stupid stab at it. The first time I've ever used an if statement. So it didn't work. And then I went and poked around and just saw some other examples. And I think what you have to do is just kind of lop off the last value that that you want to set. I want to set power management enable. So I had to surround enable inside of this set with this make if and boolean. So that's about it as a bonus fact. If you try to have it, if two conditions have a circular dependency on each other, like for example, if power management depends on mode setting and mode setting depends on power management, like in this example right here, it'll give you an infinite recursion thing, which makes sense to me because it is an infinite recursion. You are correct. All right, well, thanks for watching. I hope this was helpful.